Welcome to Diverse Joy, a podcast and educational video series that infuses science, practical skills, and most of all, joy into diversity discussions. My co-host is the sassy and fashionable Daisy Duck, also known as Dr. Amber Nelson.
And my co-host is the quirky and loose-tempered Donald Duck, a.k.a. Dr. William T.L. Cox. Yay! Welcome to the March episode.
Yeah, happy March. Happy Disney Bounding Month to Amber. Every March she dresses up and does Disney little cosplays every day.
Little mini cosplays. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, as we enter into this month, what is your joy?
So my joy that I wanted to share this month is kind of a change I made in my life that's kind of been really great for my mental health and well-being. So for many years, I've, kind of seen in my periphery research saying that you should not have your cell phone when you go to bed, that even just seeing your cell phone starts raising your stress levels. Right. Even if you're not using it in bed, you shouldn't even have it charging. Yeah. And I haven't doubted that research. It all makes logical sense to the extent that I understand it and have read it. But like one does, I was like, well, but I'm an exception. Everyone does that sometimes. But generally, you shouldn't assume that you're an exception. But then one of my excuses was, well, I read in bed and I would have, ebooks on my phone. Yeah. And so that was one thing that kept it going for a long while. But one day I just stopped it, made the decision. I started charging my cell phone in my kitchen. Yeah. And I still read in bed on a device, so I'm not, perfectly getting rid of devices like some do recommend. But I read on my iPad instead, where I'm not used to using social media and things like that. And it so phenomenally and completely changed my mental health in a major way, absolutely life-changing. With some of the kind of rotten news we've had over the last year, I was waking up every day. First thing I do would be, while still in bed, pull up social media on my phone, get some of these news. Doom scroll. Even if I already knew all the news the night before from when I was doom scrolling. Right. And it just completely stopped. Yeah. And there's this quote, well, I don't have an exact quote, but it was a story I heard Amy Tan, the author of the Juliet Club, tell in an interview. I was trying to look for it before the episode. I couldn't find exactly what she said, but I've remembered this for years. Yeah. She said that every morning she gets up and she makes her bed as the first thing that she does, because it kind of starts your day on the right foot with something being organized and neat. And that really helps her kind of continue that trend throughout the day. Yeah. And this really brought that back for me and highlight it. I'm not perfect at making my bed every day, but not going on my phone and checking social media right there first thing in the day, it carries with me through the rest of the day. 100%. So I've tried to do less social media, less doom scrolling, or even just fun social media when it's not doom and gloom. Yeah. And so sometimes I'll take my apps and put them in a folder and put them way in the back of my phone. So I have to scroll a lot just to get to them, to try to make it harder to get to reduce, my usage. And that works a little bit, but eventually you just get used to scrolling really far. Right. But not having my phone in bed in the middle of the morning all day long, I am way less on social media. 100%. It really works. Just like the kind of Amy Tan thing, where I'm not starting my day with it. And so I can go a whole day without looking at my phone or social media at all. Yep. And it went from what I now recognize I was definitely in some serious load level depression for a long while to feeling completely amazing, less anxious, less depressed, not just about the news, but life in general.
For sure. I love that. I mean, first of all, yay. Congratulations. Yay. I love that you're doing it. And it's hard. It's hard for people to unplug and to create that distance. And so it takes work, and you see the benefits of that, and it's really great. I've heard it said, and I don't know who quoted this or said it first, but everything works better once it's been unplugged. Most things work better once it's unplugged and plugged back in, even you, right?
Oh.
So like taking the moment to completely unplug and reset and then re-plug back in often helps our whole system, right? And being able to kind of unplug and be away from the device and the news and all of the things is so helpful for your own overall health and mental health.
Yeah. And like the reading I mentioned. So when it was on my phone, because you have these mental associations with your phone,
Right.
and that's always kind of a little bit of a distraction.
Right.
And, sometimes I would kind of flip out of the books app and go over to social media and check on something because I have it right there in my hand.
Or you'd see the little red notification
or that sort of thing. Yeah. But and on my iPad could go to Facebook or wherever, but it's not what I use for that.
Right.
So I don't have the mental association. I don't get the stress from it.
Yeah.
Basically, my iPad, I only use it when I travel to like watch TV or movies or stuff on a plane. And now for this reading, and I'm enjoying the books more. I'm more just, it's my iPad.
It's more immersive.
The mental association is just reading and books now.
I love that.
And I'm enjoying them more and being more immersed in the stuff I'm reading. So it's just good on so many levels. I highly recommend it. Yeah. Just one day of doing it, I felt the difference. Like I advise any of you to try that. Just plug your phone in somewhere else. Some people are like, oh, but my alarm's on my phone. And I have made that excuse too. There are plenty of very simple other ways to have an alarm wake you up.
And like an alarm clock.
Like an alarm clock, very relatively inexpensive. And also just my iPad. So that's what I do. I can set up the same kind of alarms and timers on my iPad that I had on my phone. Yep. And that works perfectly for me.
I love that for you. I love that for you.
So it's a joy about something healthy I've been doing that is bringing me more joy day by day.
Yes, that's amazing. I love that. I love that.
So, Amber, what about you? What's bringing you joy?
Well, I think similarly in that, like, trying to find small things to incorporate into my daily life or things that can help me just feel better throughout my day and life. And also last season, I talked about my 40 before 40, new experiences and new things to do before I turned 40. And one of those things that I got to help me along that path was this book called Romanticize Your Life. And it's 365 simple ways to embrace the beauty of every day. And it's just super fun, like every single day. And it's marked by the date itself. Gives you just a really small practical thing that you can do to kind of embrace something whimsical, do something that's just fun, maybe outside of your norm, just to have bring a little extra magic and beauty into your day. Aww. So this one's everyday essentials. Every day, do something creative, something generous, and something foolish. These are the words of economist, professor, and inventor Benjamin Graham, according to one of his most famous mentees, Warren Buffett. So how can you intentionally accomplish each of these tasks today? There's another one about dance. This one's finding buoyancy through stories. You can never get a cup of tea large enough or a book long enough to suit me. And then it just asks questions like, when was the last time you allowed someone else's words to truly delight you? What were some of your favorite stories as a child? And then allow yourself to get carried away through reading these words and stories that buoy your spirit. And then again, just little things, find your city's best. Set out on a quest this summer to find your city's best of something. It could be the best local bookstore, sushi restaurant, roadside farm stand, or rock climbing gym. This is an opportunity to explore and sample local gems that might have previously been overlooked.
Best Bloody Mary.
Best Bloody Mary, all kinds of really fun things. And so I went to the Tulip Festival, and I've just been able to explore all kinds of things both at home to romanticize my life and outside and in the city. So this has just been such a fun day-to-day thing. Oh, what's my new little task today? Oh, here's the book. It's also really pretty and really well illustrated. And the illustrator, his name is Amber Day. And so, it's just a fun coffee table book, but also something really simple and creative and mood boosting that you can do throughout your day. And I've really enjoyed going through it. I haven't done it every single day, but most days I at least look at it and find some version of that I can add through my day, and it helps boost my mood and give me a little something fun and fanciful to do throughout the day. So yeah,
Yay.
romanticizing your life.
Very cool. I love it. I love it. It goes well with last month's joyful recommendation from Shijo. That music she was talking about.
Yes.
Maybe that's what made you think of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kind of making you the main character 100%. Of your own romantic movie.
Yes. I love every so often I will tasks that and we might talk about this in another episode, but tasks that I don't really want to do, I'll put on a French cafe playlist on Spotify. And it just makes me feel like I'm main character energy. I'm just like in my own little film and washing dishes. So it helps me get through my mundane.
Romanticizing your chores.
Yeah, romanticizing the mundane tasks and bringing a little extra joy into my day. So It's lovely. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
All right. Well, our topic today is one that we've, talked about woven throughout many of our episodes, but we recognize that we didn't really ever give it its own attention, and it deserves it. And that is gender bias.
Right.
And so especially bias against women, although maybe we'll mention some things related to men as well. There are a number of points we wanted to hit, but getting us started, there are many research studies using different methodologies that show as soon as people learn that a baby is either a boy or a girl, they immediately start treating them differently.
Right.
And in fact, that's very often the first question they ask when someone has a kid. It's like, oh, is it a boy or a girl?
Right.
And there are research studies showing that they'll take videos of a baby crying, and if people think it's a girl, they say, oh, she's so sad, which people associate as more of feminine emotion. If it's a boy, they'll say he's angry and aggressive, and he's a pistol, and these more things. We interpret all these things kind of through gender as a lens very often. There are also these kind of famous studies, which we were talking about before we were on mic, where they'll put cameras in the little hats that they give babies and just record what people say to them. Yeah. And if the baby's a girl, or in some of the studies, they just lead people to believe the baby's a girl, the words that people say to what they think is a girl are things more associated with feelings, especially the quote unquote more feminine feelings.
Right.
Things about beauty and what she looks like and so on. If it's boys, more things about strength and, oh, he's going to be a football player and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are the baby X experiments or studies in early 1970s. They were doing stuff like that, where it kind of didn't necessarily disclose the gender of the child, and to see how were people interacting with them.
Yeah. And one thing people don't realize is that until puberty, the main visible biological difference between boys and girls is just their genitals.
Right.
So all the secondary sex characteristics with minor exceptions perhaps, but by and large, if the kid's not wearing pink or blue and you're not, looking in their diaper area, you cannot tell the difference between a boy and a girl. Even up to 9 years old. Some girls go into puberty around that age, so if they have, then that's an exception. But if they haven't, still at that age, you cannot tell the difference without the sorts of ways we dress up gender expression. Longer hair, frilly dresses, pink versus blue.
Right.
And part of why we do all that stuff so much is because you really can't see much of a difference otherwise.
Absolutely.
But that ends up kind of teaching the kids, oh, there's this kind of fundamental difference that otherwise they might not learn.
Right. Absolutely. Well, when you're talking about those gender norms, the gender expression, the gender roles, right? These are all the things that are socially constructed, socially reinforced, and are put on how we learn what it means to be a boy or a girl, right?
And how we learn it for ourselves, but then also what we put on other people.
Others. Absolutely.
And so kids just like everything we talk about with kind of the bias being like a habit, but gender is one of the strongest that kids are most explicitly taught,
100%.
even if people don't realize they're explicitly teaching it. Because no one goes and says, well, you should think of Black people as being, this, that, and that. Most, like we've said in a recent episode, people avoid talking about race. But with gender, people are very direct about it. Like, oh, girls do these activities, boys do those. And so it ends up making those very strong habits we have in our minds.
Right.
And then even as adults, those biases come out in what we think about women versus men in different professions.
Right.
That women maybe will be better in professions that have more loving and nurturing and beauty types of things.
Right.
That men will be better in leadership, assertive kinds of roles. There's a whole literature on women scientists and men scientists, but about bias against women scientists.
Right.
That in order to be taken seriously as a woman and a scientist, women have to start being more masculine. Right. So women who wear less makeup are a little more, their gender expression is more masculine. They get taken more seriously as scientists. People think that they're better and smarter in their area of science.
And we see that also in even expressions of like feminist movements, right? That some of those first wave feminists really took that on as part of what it means to be a feminist, is to kind of take on those male,
no more pink and no more dresses.
Male characteristics, and especially in the like 70s and 80s, wearing more masculine clothing and being defeminizing oneself and embodying a lot of those like masculine, what are characterized as masculine traits. And again, and then third wave feminism kind of went the other way, like, hey, we can be hyper feminized and still should be respected, should be smart, even to the point of like choosing things, like sex work and things like that can also be seen as empowering, right? Like that's something that is a big topic. It's a big topic. I'm not going there right now, but I'm just saying that thing that used to be seen as like, oh, that's misogynistic, that it's kind of saying like we can reclaim our power and femininity, and even in these things, that can also be, we can still be a feminist even in something like that, this kind of hyper, quote unquote, hyper feminist. So I think that we've shifted from saying that we have to occupy a man's space and have to hold on and look and be and talk this way, to now looking through it from a much more intersectional lens and lots more integration.
And by we, you mean women who are trying to do this work, not necessarily society.
Right. Not necessarily as a socially generalized opinion. Yeah.
So I have a good friend and colleague, Dr. Ashley Hoskin. I don't know if she listens, but hey, Ashley. And she and her colleagues, I believe, but she does a lot of work on this term, what she calls femmephobia. So if you think of so I use the term anti-gay prejudice when talking about what some people call homophobia, but femmephobia is kind of the same idea. It's kind of dislike, prejudice, animus, bias against things that are traditionally feminine. Right. So wearing dresses, wearing pink, wearing makeup. And so she has all this research on this where some of it I've already said, we're kind of more feminine presenting, feminine expressive. Women don't get taken as seriously as scientists. Right. But in general, there's this kind of hostility towards femininity that kind of runs throughout society that they've documented in so many different ways. Some of the research even shows, so people assume that gay men are feminine. Right. And there's a lot of research that says that's what drives anti-gay prejudice. And if you have a gay man who's very masculine presenting, the anti-gay prejudice goes away. Right. The person who otherwise would kind of be a hater against gay people, if they think the gay man's masculine, then he's all right. So the hostility towards gay men in part seems to be in part hostility towar's femininity. Yeah,
which we see that. Well, rolling back just a little bit, you said that women have a harder time being taken seriously as scientists and things like that in certain fields, or like masculine or more male predominant fields. And I think about what that, the parallel for other marginalized communities is saying, like, we have to
Code switch.
Yeah, code switch and prove ourselves in those spaces to say and show that
Amber's black ass mouth is not allowed.
Right. You know, have to prove ourselves and that we belong in those spaces and that we belong in those. And so then we end up doing a lot of the code switching and bringing certain parts to show that, yes, I can be just as masculine.
And we know that
you.
has awful mental health consequences
100%,
for folks.
100%.
And they're not being their authentic selves.
Right. And going back to the last episode, talking about sense of belonging and all of those pieces. Yeah. So I think that's a really big part of it. But also when you're talking about the hostility towards femininity, it makes me think of the man versus bear argument.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Should we recap that in case someone's not aware?
The man v. bear argument is, you know, when you ask a woman, if you were out in the middle of the woods, would you rather come across a man that you don't know, a man, or a bear? And the debate online in particular,
most women say the
conversation,
bear.
Most women are saying the bear. And the reaction, particularly from men, have been like, why would you say that? Like, why would you want to encounter a bear over a man? And many men having a really hard time understanding why a woman would rather
explicitly hostile and mansplaining,
explicitly hostile.
Like, you're
towards
dumb for making. I'm not saying this. I'm imitating. Right. You're dumb for saying that. You don't know how dangerous bears are. Right. And really, it's you don't know how dangerous some men are to a woman.
Right. Exactly. But that hostility and the experience, and of course, this, I'm not even going to get into all the rates and everything, but the experience of violence towards women and women's bodies and women, girls, and trans women's, which is the whole umbrella of women's bodies, right? And so that fear, the hostility, whether that is verbal aggression or kind of the anti-femininity to like literal physical harm and violence, and that idea that I'd rather take my chances with a bear than a man that I don't know.
Generally speaking, around bears, if you know what type of bear it is and you know what you're doing, there are rules to follow that the bears follow also. Right. And in theory, as humans, we have rules to follow, but not everyone follows them the same way. Right. And so, you know, if with a certain kind of bear, you have to appear bigger, certain kind of bear, you play dead or whatever. And it can be negative. And most bears try to avoid humans, right? I believe. Don't listen to this podcast for bear advice.
There are folks that go like chasing them,
but try to get a selfie with the bear and they get mauled.
Yeah. Well, I saw on social media or TikTok or something that this woman was trying to get her husband to understand the feeling that women get and why they would choose a bear over a man, and their experience, how they described it was like, how did she describe it? Essentially, she equated it to like if you were in prison in the shower and dropping a bar of soap and the fear, like, and he was like, oh, that's really scary to me. I would be afraid that I could get harmed in that situation. I was like, that fear, like
alone in the woods with a strange man.
Right, most of the people are probably not being harmed in that situation. And he's like, but you never know at what point you might get. She's like, exactly, right? Like that's the feeling that we have when we're maybe out in the woods or we encounter somebody that we don't know. We don't know which man is safe and which one isn't. Whereas a bear, we have these rules that we can follow. We have these things that we know we can probably protect ourselves against. In this situation, we don't know. The rules aren't always being followed. We don't know which one it might be.
Our producer has looked up some bear facts. Yeah. Under normal circumstances, by and large, bears do not attack or hunt or eat people. Bear attacks happen when the animal's defending itself. So as we kind of thought. Right. All right. So we're going to go on break real quick. We have a little more before we get to story time, but we'll see you in a moment. Welcome back from break, everyone. So one of the big things I wanted to talk about when we're tackling kind of gender bias is something called the gender similarities hypothesis. So this is something that one of my professors, one of my closest advisors when I was in graduate school, an amazing gender researcher and all-around researcher named Dr. Janet Hyde, coined this term gender similarities hypothesis. And a lot of her research looked at studies that say like, oh, boys and girls are different on some dimension. Like, oh, maybe boys are better at math than girls or something. And a lot of those studies end up being kind of poorly conducted. So, with statistics, and we talked some about this last time with Shijo, sometimes you get a false positive where it's like, oh, something's statistically significantly different between boys and girls or men and women. But then there are many, many other times where that difference isn't observed.
Right.
But if you don't observe a difference, it kind of isn't a story. So when people have that in their research, if I'm studying math, there's no difference between the boys and girls in my study. I just talk about whatever math thing I was talking about. I never even mentioned that there was no difference.
Right.
But if I find a difference and I can say, oh, this was statistically significant, then I can build a little story around it. So it results in a publication bias where when you find a difference, it's more likely to get published and mentioned and shown. And all the times there's no difference between boys and girls or men and women, it doesn't get published. And so one way to kind of work against that trend is to do these things called meta-analyses, where you take hundreds of studies, whether or not they mention gender, and then get at whether there were gender differences or not. And there are statistical ways to look across those studies. And Janet did this with many students over many years. I bet it's hundreds of meta-analysis analyses, but it's at least dozens.
Yeah.
And then she pulled together one huge meta-analysis looking at these gender differences and this gender similarities, I should say, looking at these gender similarities.
Yep.
This gender similarities hypothesis essentially said that on most psychological variables, not all, but most, differences between gender are probably pretty small, if not zero. Across these meta-analyses, that's basically what she found. So in this paper, which we can link with the episode description, 78% of alleged gender differences or gender comparisons were either small or close to zero when you looked at their effect size, including things that people in the public eye think are huge gender differences. There are only a handful of things where there's kind of a bigger or more reliable gender difference. And there are also questions around those that I'll get to. One of those is physical aggression, which we were just talking about. So in most measures of physical aggression, men are much higher in that. But they're also, so this isn't as definitive, but when you look at relational aggression, there's some studies at least that show maybe a little more of that with women. And so if you think of those as both aggression and put them together and say, if we're talking any kind of aggression, then actually the gender difference might kind of go away. It's just that they channel aggression in different ways. The other thing where there is a bit more of a consistent difference is with sexuality. So men are much more likely to be more permissive of having casual sex and much more likely to report masturbating.
Right.
And then a few things with physical dexterity, like throwing distance. And that's another one where, that was a clear and large statistical difference in these meta-analyses. But the kind of more qualitative qualifying of that is there are other studies that show, boys get pushed to start working on that physical prowess at very young ages.
Earlier,
And if girls are pressured or encouraged in that way, they develop muscles in a way where they can kind of throw as well. And maybe, so even though it is a big difference that we see overall, if girls were kind of pushed the same way boys were, even that physical difference with throwing balls and developed muscles and so on might not actually be as different as we think.
Right. Well, it makes me think of a couple things. One is the default, right? Like even though there's no difference, right, that we still have a bias default on, and that's going back to that kind of socially constructed understandings of gender differences, right? So when we only hear the stories or the research that talks about the differences between gender and we don't hear about all of these things,
all the similarities,
we kind of default to these things. So I think about like the race default and now the gender default. Like there's this kind of default narrative around the differences that then have also been kind of socially constructed and socially reinforced, when there are ways that some of those differences, not all, but some, like maybe some of the physical pieces, if it was introduced earlier on, we'd likely not see that same shift. And then also the other piece that I'm thinking about, my brain is going into lots of different directions, but I'm even thinking about, again, that the social piece of this, that even though there isn't necessarily a strong gender difference, like what we socially allow for differences, right? And I even think about, since we're dressed as Daisy and and Donald, and in movies and in media, what genders are allowed to express, and how like male characters are allowed to express and be loud and angry and messy and sloppy, and girl characters are not. So Donald is allowed to be loud and angry and have a temper, and Daisy is his girlfriend, who is supposed to be lovely and sweet and nice, right? And she can't have a temper, and she can't be aggressive. She can't be relationally aggressive.
Sassy, though.
She's got a little sass.
I think it's also changed over the years. Early on,
100%. It's changed over the years, and so we see that arc. But were you going to say something?
So you were talking about the kind of differences and similarities.
Yeah.
That was a huge thing that Janet always talked about, that, for years she'd been making this argument, but she hadn't named it.
Yes.
And as soon as she named it, the gender similarities hypothesis, it got more attention. Yeah. It got more momentum and more recognition, because just saying, oh, there's not a difference, it sounds like a non-effect,
it's a non
thing to talk about.
Right. It's the active versus passive language,
but
and really being
saying gender similarities hypothesis.
Right. Yeah. Versus kind of actively saying that here's the gender differences. No, there's a lot more similar than dissimilar, which also reminds me again of even pink tax, right?
Oh, yeah.
So these socially understood or allowed understandings of gender, when we think again about gender differences versus the similarities. Now we started marketing things that are the same exact things.
So like you get a
boys and girls.
You get a pink screwdriver.
Right.
And
you get a screwdriver that's the classic gray and yellow or orange or blue for the boys, and the pink and gray one. And all of a sudden there's a price difference because
and that's the pink tax.
This is the pink tax, right? But we have the exact same things, or the Legos, which I mentioned before. We've got Legos that like, hey, maybe girls actually do like to build things and want to play with screwdrivers or want to play with Legos. But if we're gonna market it to girls, it better be pink. Yeah. Or things like not only is it just the pink color pink, but we call it the pink tax just because of, again, the gender differences and how that's marketed and the literal markup that happens. So we see a 20 to 30% increase in apparel, how much apparel costs, those things that are marketed to women versus men. There's about a 7% increase in toys and 8% increase in health and wellness things. And so things even like razors, right? Men and women both use razors, and this is a whole other thing. But razors in particular started off like it wasn't a thing that women had to shave their legs, but I can't remember which razor company. They were like, there's a whole half of the people that aren't using our razors.
And they pushed the idea.
And so they started pushing the idea that women needed to shave their legs so that they could market their razors to women. And then now we have the exact same razor. Are men's razors that they use for their face the same as the ones we use on our legs? Yes, but the literal pink razor is more expensive than the men's razor. Same brand, same razor, just a little different packaging. It's more expensive. And even then to things around like tax around menstrual products and things like that. So we have Tim Walz became Gillette. Yes, Gillette was the one that marketed to women first. Yeah. And so, but I'm thinking about like Tim Walz. Well, there was some folks that were criticizing him by calling him Tampon Tim, because one of the other taxes that happens is even on menstrual products, right? Like we don't have to. There are other ways in which we can manage our bodies as folks who menstruate, but that this is something that we use on a regular basis. Every month we generally speaking, use menstrual products. And there are some states and some places that have additional taxes on menstrual products. And Tim Walz, he signed a bill that made it to where all menstruating students could have access to menstrual products, which was a huge thing, is a huge boon. And yet he still came under fire for it. But all of that to say, like the idea of a pink tax is that things that are marketed to women, things that are for women, for our health, our well-being, things that the same exact thing, a Lego blocks, a razor, a screwdriver could cost more just because it is marketed to us.
So back on the one last thing I wanted to say about the kind of gender similarities. Yeah. It's a quote that Janet always had. People often say that phrase that, oh, men are from Mars and kind of women are from right. Venus. And I want everyone out there to kind of think in terms of gender similarities. And Janet recommends we think that of gender as more being, rather than men from Mars and women from Venus, it's more like men are from North Dakota and women are from South Dakota.
Right.
Much more similar than different. And when we think about the kind of statistics there, even when there is a statistically significant difference, those are from very overlapping distributions. So even when there's something where men and women are different, there's going to be almost 50% of women are going to be higher than the average man on whatever the difference is, because we overlap so much. And there's much more overlap than the difference is another way to put that.
Yeah. Again, I like even thinking about the pink tax, right? There's all of these things that we have in common. That's the same thing. We're all wearing clothes. We're all using razors. We're all doing these things. There overlap. There's much more in common than there is dissimilar. But it's easy for us to or socially, we kind of highlight those things that are different or artificially create a difference in order for us to have more separation.
Yeah. Absolutely.
One last just comment. And while we talk about the kind of these socially reinforced and socially constructed kind of ideas of gender, I want to make it really clear that we're not talking about the construct of gender. We're just talking about the gender expression, gender norms, gender roles, because the whole concept of gender itself is a whole other conversation. So we're talking about the gender bias here rather than gender identity.
So I was also going to say, we were talking about gender bias, thinking specifically kind of more about bias against women. Mm-hmm. And I want to acknowledge we've mostly been saying men and women and boys and girls. We're don't mean to deny the existence of non-binary folks. As all you long-term listeners know, we've had whole episodes about that in the past.
Yes.
It's just we're using that dynamic because that's where a lot of this bias comes from, is thinking about the distinction between how men are treated and women are treated, or what people think about them.
And I do think that socially we are seeing a lot more pushing of some of these norm reinforcements and expressions. We're seeing some shifting in how our culture is viewing and understanding gender. Again, working with the kids, it's so beautiful to be able to see kids and how they understand gender and how they're expressing themselves so differently and more freely than we ever were allowed socially to when we were young. I think that we're moving into a different place culturally speaking, and this is where the research is. And so, I just wanted to make sure that we're identifying, we're not specifically talking about gender identity. We're not dismissing the fact that we do not live in a binary, and that this is kind of how research is set up.
Yep. All right. So next we have some story time.
Yeah.
So this is a story from a colleague of mine, also a psychology PhD, who's a professor now, but I didn't get permission to name her, so I won't. But if you're listening, hey, she was at some sort of family gathering around Christmas, I believe. One of her little nieces got a dress as a present, and she put it on, kind of was twirling around and excited and happy about her dress. And one of this person's older male family members was was kind of saying like, oh, look at that. You can't teach that. Basically saying like, oh, gender's, hardwired or something like that. Meanwhile, this girl's kind of running around in her dress, acting pretty. And then everyone's kind of clapping for her and encouraging her.
Yeah.
And my friend was like, you're teaching her right now.
This is what learning is.
And I want to have a little quiz for our listeners that this story actually illustrates one of the core concepts that we talked about in a previous episode. I'm going to give you just a moment, like one of those things we talk about in the skill section. And do you know what it is?
It's a little Dora the Explorer moment. Ask the camera, do you know what this is?
So it's norm enforcement, right? So there's this norm that girls are supposed to be interested in their looks and dresses. And then people are pushing this girl and encouraging her when she's showing that interest. Yep. So that norm enforcement that we talked about a few episodes ago. So that was our more negative story. And Amber, you wanted to shout out a positive story kind of from the media.
Yeah, it's a more media heavy story and not a personal story. But I think really thinking about gender differences and gender bias, looking at the resurgence, I think, of women's sports in particular, that we're in this era where we are kind of, women's sports is kind of reclaiming or claiming a title and saying like, hey, we are just as valid as men's sports, and they're getting out more notoriety and things like that. So I think about Ilona Maher is my current girl crush. I love Ilona Maher. She's an Olympian, a rugby player, and she's been around for a while. I think she's been playing, I'm probably going to butcher this, but I think like 10 years or something like that. She's been playing for a while. But this last year in 2025, she won. She became pretty popular on social media for really owning her femininity as a rugby player, which tend to be kind of maybe counterintuitive, but she goes out there and makeup and red lipstick is super identifiable. She was on like Dancing with the Stars and played, there was a dance that she did. She started playing at 17. Yeah. So she's been playing longer than 10 years because I think she's like 30 or almost 30. Anyway, so her owning her femininity, seeing what it means. And she, like I said, she was on Dancing with the Stars, and she had a dance where she was Luisa from Encanto. And that's kind of who she embodies. And anyway, I just think that it's been really cool. She also won, I think, the ESPYs for Breakout Athlete of the Year last year. And she talks about like, oh, it took me 10 years or however many years to become a breakout star. Anyway, she's amazing. And it's been really cool to see this resurgence, not only in like rugby, which I don't think has had a really big spotlight on women in rugby. We now have like, what is it? The professional baseball league, women's professional baseball league, women's basketball. We're getting more women's teams in the WNBA. Portland, Oregon just got their new women's team. So we're just seeing this resurgence and kind of a claiming of like, hey, women belong in sports and we can bring in money just as much or more. And that's been a conversation in soccer for a really long, women's soccer for a really long time. But it's been really cool to see this kind of surge in popularity and icons like Ilona Maher and different sports popping up and people watching and it drawing crowds and bringing people in. So I also think about like Caitlin Clark. There are lots of Angel Reese. There are all these people.
Go through every female athlete.
But again, right now,
Ilona Maher.
Ilona Maher, but these women that are really bringing money and attention and everything back to women's sports. So anyway.
Okay, cool. We'll go to our last break and be back to wrap up.
Great. Right. Well, welcome back from the break. Our question, friend, is, we've been talking about gender bias, and one of the questions that have come up is, what is the Bechdel test?
This is something that if if our listeners, if any of you kind of pay attention to kind of media criticism or movie criticism, it's something that comes up a lot. So it's sometimes called the Bechdel Wallace test, but I think most people know it as the Bechdel test. Yeah. And this woman, this scholar, this artist kind of came up with this test for movies
and TV
to kind of evaluate how women characters have been treated kind of by the movie. And so there are kind of three very simple components to the test. In order to pass it, there have to be two women in the movie with names. They have to talk to each other, and their conversation has to be about something other than a man.
Right.
And when she first kind of talked about this, like most movies failed. There would be like one female character in the whole movie, even though there are like 8 men. Right. Or there would be 2 women having some conversation, but it was about a man.
Right.
And it's not even that if you pass this test, that means it's great for women or there's something special about it. It's just kind of a bare minimum, like scraping the bottom of any kind of women having agency talking about something that's other than a man. Right. And so like many common things fail. So for instance, the TV show Sex and the City, almost every single episode fails because the women never talk about anything other than who they're dating or who they're having sex with. Right. And a movie like Jurassic Park, which was pretty much all men, except for the dinosaurs were women, but it actually passed because there's one very brief conversation where the 2 female characters who do have names say 2 things back and forth, like 2 or 3 lines total. Right. But that's all it takes to pass. And so part of the point is that it is really a low bar.
It's a very low bar. And surprisingly easy to fail.
Well, yeah. Or surprisingly, many movies
fail. Right. Yeah.
I've had people ask me about that because I'm like, oh, this movie failed the Bechdel test. And I'm like, what is that?
Yeah.
Some movies, they all know that some people use this test. And there are some movies where the 2 women, what they talk about is something really stupid, like farts. Like there was one movie where like it was 2 ladies talking about her farts and they were kind of like doing it just for the Bechdel test to show, hey, it can be something really dumb. Right. And that's part of the point.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's been expanded. There have been some other tests, right? I think it's the Makamori that kind of delves a little bit deeper into, the construct of the woman's actual narrative story. And there have been others like I think it's the Duvernay that looks at representation. But yeah, it is a surprisingly low mark, and also surprising to see like how many TV and shows actually do kind of fail it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what is our habit-breaking skill, friend?
We have that kind of model, the motivation awareness tools and effort to work on kind of breaking bias habits. For most of the season, we've been going through those awareness skills, like these different bias constructs, ways bias plays out. And now we're moving to the T. So the MATE, we're moving into the tools. And the first of those tools is to favor mindfulness over kind of blunt, ineffective approaches. Yeah. And the reason we have to kind of draw attention to this is there's a lot of things people think will be good ideas for overcoming bias, like, just ignoring race or ignoring gender, or just kind of pushing stereotypes out of their mind, kind of thought suppression, or just trying to be objective. And all of those things actually backfire. They lead people to display more bias rather than less. And we've talked more in depth about some of those in previous episodes, so I'm not going to belabor them. But in place of doing those kinds of blunt, shove it out of your mind things, we want to favor mindfulness. Yeah. So we actually want to be more aware of how bias might be influencing us. Like bias is going to come to mind. That's just a fact. Right. We have these habits of mind, and we're much better served by acknowledging them and be like, hey, okay, if this comes to mind, how is it going to influence my behavior?
Right.
If the little girl's dancing in her dress and I'm like, oh, this is so cute. And then I say that, like, oh, I'm kind of pushing her to behave a certain way because of her gender. If it was a boy, I might not have done that. So that kind of normal first, being aware of it, and then putting into play some more effective tools, which we're going to talk about for most of the rest of the season during the skills section. And I was wondering if you had any kind of notes on kind of mindfulness and its application for this particularly you'd like to share.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is that passive versus active that we have to bring to it's part of habit reversal. It's part of how we change our habits is not only do we have to be aware of it, but we have to be really actively mindful of I'm naming this thing and then I am going to do something with it, right? It's okay that it came up, that even a bias, that it's okay. I'm acknowledging that the bias came up. I'm being really mindful. Now, what can I do now with this? And that's really how we change behavior. It's how we address our mental health, is being able to say, like, here are triggers, here are things, here is all of what's going on. And I'm going to be really mindful that this is what's happening in this moment. And this is what I'm going to do next. And like you said, we're going to be talking a lot more about those tools, but that being really intentional. I kind of use the term intentional about, like, I'm going to be really intentional about when things are being reinforced, when these biases come up, and what I'm going to be doing with them.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. So as always, we wrap up with our joyful recommendation, which Amber has for us today.
I do. And I'm bringing up my phone because I want to share a quote from it. I am recommending the play And Juliet. Have you heard of it?
Yes. Yeah. I haven't seen it or anything, but
Oh my gosh, it's amazing. So this summer it came to Portland and I saw it and I really didn't know a whole lot about it. And I was with a friend at a barbecue and I was like, oh my gosh, hey, and Juliet's in town. We should go, because he also really loves musical theater. And he was like, I don't really know much about it. I was like, yeah, but we should go. Literally 2 days later, or the next day, I was at work and one of my colleagues said, hey, I've got 2 free tickets to And Juliet. Does anybody want them? And I was like, can I please have them? I just was talking about this last night. So we go, and it's really the story of, there's a lot happening, but it's this story of, what if Juliet did not end it all after Romeo's death, right? What if she went on to say, I'm going to keep living, I'm going to do my life. So it's her story post Romeo's death, right?
Oh.
And tons of diversity, tons of representation. It's a jukebox musical, meaning that it takes like regular music and uses that as the musical. And it is a millennial fever dream. Like, it's tons of Backstreet Boys. It's got some NSYNC. It's got Britney Spears. It's got Kelly Clarkson. It's got all Katy Perry. Tons and tons of music. It's such a beautiful story. And again, lots of representation. And there's a character whose name is May. They are non-binary. And at one point, so there's like a meta story going on with William Shakespeare writing the story with his wife. And they introduce the character of May, and May comes out and is like a male embodied person. And William Shakespeare goes like, wait, shouldn't May is Juliet's best friend in the play. And essentially William Shakespeare is like, shouldn't May be a girl? And his wife's response is, really? This from a man who's built a career on men dressing as women, often playing women dressing as men? The man whose name is basically synonymous with gender bending? Do you really think it's up to you to question May's gender or sexuality? Or do you think maybe May is whoever May is and it's really none of your business? And I just love that. Anyway, the whole story, like they use the NSYNC song, It's Gonna Be May, and they May has this really beautiful song where they take Britney Spears' song, I'm Not a Girl, Not Yet a Woman, to describe their gender identity. And it's just so beautiful. And it's just so fun. It's nostalgic. It's empowering. It's a really cool take on a really classic play. And so I absolutely, if you have the chance to see And Juliet, listen to the music, listen to the Broadway production of it, but also find the playlist on Spotify. It is, like I said, a millennial fever dream. It's like all of our music. It's just really good. And so definitely recommend. And like I said, just racial and gender and all kinds of diversity just infused in it. And it's really, really fun. So yeah, if you get a chance,
awesome.
Go listen to it or watch it.
All right. So our last little temporary mini segment. My book comes out later this month.
Yay!
So if you're watching or listening to this episode right when it comes out later this month, my book will be available for real,
so
not
exciting.
Just pre-order.
Yeah.
So it comes out on May 17th, St. Patrick's Day.
March.
March 17th. May.
It's because I was saying May. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's going to be May. It's going to be March. March 17th.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, get your book today.
Yay. I'm Dr. William Cox.
And I'm Dr. Amber Nelson.
Diverse Joy is produced by Eric Roman Binding with music by Jay Arner. Follow us at Diverse Joy on most social media platforms for extra content. If you enjoy the show, help us reach more people by leaving 5-star reviews or by recommending it personally. Word of mouth accounts for 70% of how people find new podcasts. New episodes released the first Wednesday of every month. Watch us on YouTube, listen in any podcasting app, or check us out at diversejoy.com, where you can also find additional diversity education resources, buy some incredible merchandise, or donate to support the show. Diverse Joy is the official podcast of Inequity Agents of Change, a nonprofit devoted to evidence-based approaches to reduce bias, create inclusion, and promote equity. All that good Jedi work. Learn more at biashabit.com. Thank you for joining us. Now, go find your joy.
Bye.
Bye.